Adapted from 10,000 Days in Alaska, Books 1, 2, and 3 by Norman Wilkins. Forward. Norman Wilkins and Slovenia-born Ladislava Kolenc, Sylvia to those who know her, met in postwar Gorizia, Italy in 1946, marrying there in 1948. They moved to Iowa, where Norman grew up, and farmed in several communities until 1957 when they moved to Motley, Minnesota, and built the Tamarack Dell dairy farm. There, they raised their family and farmed until the late 1970s. Norman had long felt the pull of the North, drawn to the mystique of Alaska, the last American frontier, many said. And once the children were on their own, that desire to go north grew stronger. He made more than one hunting trip to Alaska before the 1978 expedition included in this book, and as the trips unfolded, so did Norman's desire to make Alaska his permanent home, to be a part of the expansive wilderness, and yes, explore for gold. Sylvia was not so enthusiastic in the beginning. Bear in mind, those first few years they lived in a one-room, 12-foot by 16-foot plywood cabin with no indoor toilet, no electricity, and no running water. Once after they settled in Alchina, Sylvia was asked how she liked Alaska, to which she replied, "I really like the people here, but you can take Alaska and give it back to the Eskimos." They did find gold in Alaska. They found it in the air, the mountains, the wildlife, and especially in the people. The people they worked shoulder to shoulder with and shared their table with, each one weaving an independent piece of the tapestry of everyday life in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and until 2005 along the Glen Highway. From their log cabin overlooking Scoter Lake at Nelchina, radiating outward to Glen Allen, Anchorage, Copper Center, Talk, Palmer, Wasilla, Fairbanks, Denali, Matanuska, Susitna, Valdez, Cordova, and other Arctic communities, Norman Wilkins recorded daily journal entries throughout the entire 25-plus years he and Sylvia spent carving out a life on the Alaskan tundra. 10,000 Days in Alaska is a 3-volume documentary journal. All 3 books are available on Amazon in Kindle and paperback. Norman and Sylvia moved back to Minnesota in 2004 due to advancing age, but a big part of Norman's heart remained in Alaska. Norman passed in 2017, and Sylvia followed 3 years later. I'm proud to call them my parents. Nadia Jordana, Cloud 9 Publishing. Let's begin our story. Episode 1, The Road North. We got a middle of the afternoon start on August 11th, 1978. My brother Jerry Wilkins was on this trip with me. There wasn't anything dramatic about the departure. No ceremony. No sense that I was crossing a line I couldn't come back from. Motley, Minnesota looked the same in the rearview mirror as it always had. Quiet, familiar, settled in its ways. But I had been thinking about Alaska for a long time by then, longer than I probably admitted to anyone, even Sylvia. The farm, the years, raising the kids. It had all been good, but there was something in me that had never quite settled. Alaska had a way of working on a man like that. So we loaded up the truck, pointed west, and left. The first stretch of road didn't feel much different from any other trip. Highway 10 took me to Fargo, then north on 29 to Grand Forks, and from there I picked up Highway 2 heading west. It was late summer, and the land was open and wide in that familiar Midwestern way. Fields of grain, cattle scattered in the distance, small towns that came and went without much notice. By the time I reached Devil's Lake, I had covered about 270 miles. We kept going a while longer before pulling off north of Minot and making camp for the night. It was a quiet start, just driving, just putting distance behind me. The next morning we were on the road by 7:30. The land hadn't changed much yet. Rolling hills flattening out into long stretches of open country. But there was already a feeling that I was moving into something different, something less predictable. About 40 miles east of Lloydminster, I came up on a roadblock. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police had set up a checkpoint, and they waved us over. The officer leaned down toward the window, calm and professional. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "Alaska," I told him. He looked at me for a moment, then gave a small nod, like he'd heard that answer plenty of times before. "Long way yet," he said. "That's what I hear." They checked us over and let us pass without any trouble. It was a brief stop, but it stayed with me. It was the first time on the trip that someone else had acknowledged where I was going, Not just another drive, not just another stretch of highway, but Alaska. Something about that made it feel more real. Not long after that, the weather turned. It started as rain, steady and heavy, and then, without much warning, it turned to hail. By the time we reached Lloydminster, it had become one of the worst storms I'd ever driven in. The hail pounded so hard on the truck that it drowned out conversation, and visibility dropped to almost nothing. At one point, we couldn't see past the hood. Traffic came to a complete stop, cars and trucks lined up along the road, everyone waiting it out. "You see anything?" my brother, Jerry, asked from the passenger seat. "Not a thing," I said. We sat there with the engine idling, the storm hammering down around us, and there wasn't anything to do but wait. It was a good reminder, early in the trip, that once you start heading north and west like that, you give up a certain amount of control. The road decides things for you more often than you'd like. By the third day, we were seeing more signs that we were getting into different country. Just east of Edmonton, we came across a buffalo herd, big animals, moving slow and steady across the land. There's something about seeing buffalo that makes everything else feel smaller. Not long after that, we had a tire failure, which slowed us down again. Along the road, there were rabbits everywhere, darting in and out of the brush. Jerry tried his luck at one, but didn't get a shot off in time. The farther we went, the rougher the road became. On August 14th, we got an early start, but progress was slow. There were stretches where the road was so bad, I had to keep the truck in low gear for miles at a time. At one point, for over 60 miles. The truck handled it, but it was hard going. You could feel every rock, every rut, every bad decision made by whoever had last worked on that stretch. Somewhere along the way, we passed a burned-out pickup and trailer sitting in the ditch. Nothing left but a blackened frame and twisted metal. We didn't stop, but I slowed down enough to take it in. It doesn't take much imagination to picture how something like that ends. You think about it for a minute or two, then you keep driving. That evening, we made it to mile 747 on the Alaska Highway, where Ed and Gloria Dolan lived. Ed was a hunting guide, and they welcomed us like they were used to travelers coming through. "You boys look like you've had a long stretch of road," Gloria said as we stepped inside. "That's about right," I told her. Ed laughed. "Road'll do that. Sit down. We got food on." It was a simple evening, good food, conversation, a chance to sit still for a while. But stood out. When you're traveling like that, those small moments of hospitality carry more weight than you expect. The next day, we pushed on toward Whitehorse, then continued toward the border. The road alternated between decent and difficult, sometimes dry and manageable, other times wet and sloppy. We made it to the U.S.-Canadian border and camped there for the night. On August 16th, we finally reached Anchorage. Just like that, after days on the road, we were there. We camped at Jerry Brandt's place, a friend of my brother's, and the next morning we started doing what we had come to do, running down leads on gold claims. It didn't go the way we had hoped. Appointments fell through. People didn't show up. Information was scattered, incomplete, or just plain wrong. We spent a lot of time driving from one place to another, chasing possibilities that didn't turn into anything solid. He said 10 o'clock. Jerry said one morning as we waited outside a place where we were supposed to meet a man about a claim. "Yeah," I said. We waited a while longer. "You think he's coming?" "No," I said. We got used to that. Still, not everything was a loss. We spent time with people, Chad and Trish and Girdwood, for one, and those connections made the trip feel like more than just a string of dead ends. One day we went down toward Hope, where Jerry tried fishing for salmon, but had no luck. The next day, things turned around. We went out to the Kenai River with better gear, salmon eggs, and pixie lures, and before long the water came alive in a way it hadn't before. "There you go," Chad called out. "Hold 'em steady." I had the line tight and could feel the strength of the fish pulling against it. "Don't rush it," he said. "I'm not," I told him. It took some work, but I brought it in, a solid salmon, strong and bright. Chad got one too, and for the first time on the trip, it felt like we had something to show for our efforts. We made the most of it. I built a simple smoker out of tarp, some poles and rope, and we cooked and preserved what we could. The rest we ate fresh. There's a satisfaction in that kind of work, catching your own food, preparing it yourself, that doesn't need explaining. A few days later, driving back from one of those trips, we had an encounter that stayed with me. Chad was driving, moving a little faster than he probably should have, when suddenly Jerry spotted it. Bear! Chad hit the brakes, and there it was, a massive grizzly in the opposite lane, moving with a kind of calm authority that made everything else seem small. Easy, I said, though there wasn't much to do. We sat there for a moment, watching it, the size of it, the way it carried itself. Big one, Chad said quietly. We all knew how lucky we were it hadn't stepped into our lane. After that, we didn't say much for a while. As the days went on, we pushed farther into the country, into places where there were no real roads, just trails, rock, mud, and whatever you could manage to drive over. We worked claims, panned for gold, ran gravel through a small sluice box. We did find gold, fine color, enough to prove it was there, but it was clear that working those claims would take heavy equipment and a level of investment we weren't prepared for. By late September, we moved into the Nelchina area, traveling up the Little Nelchina River and overland toward Tyone Creek. There was ice in the water by then, and the land had a different feel, colder, quieter, more serious. We saw caribou, moose, more wildlife than I had ever seen in one place. The work, though, was constant. Equipment broke. Springs snapped. Chains failed. At one point, Ray tried to solve a mechanical problem by shooting a hole through a part with a .22 rifle. "I'll just punch through here," he said. "With what?" I asked. "This'll do it," he fired, and put a hole straight through the motor's oil cooler. We spent the rest of the day figuring out how to make it work again. That was Alaska in a way I hadn't fully understood before coming up. Things break, and you either fix them or you don't. There isn't much in between. By the end of September, the weather made the decision for us. We woke up one morning to an inch of snow on the ground, and that was enough. We packed up and made our way back toward the highway, dealing with breakdowns and delays along the way. Back in Anchorage, we made a few more attempts to sort out claim information, but nothing came together. Too many uncertainties, too many loose ends. So on October 24th, we turned south and started the long drive home. It wasn't an easy trip. At one point, I ran out of gas 35 miles from mine it. I hitched a ride into town, got a can of fuel, and started walking back before someone picked me up and drove me the rest of the way. That's how it goes. I made it home on October 29th, around 5 in the afternoon. Trip over. We hadn't found what we were looking for. Not in the way we had hoped. Not in gold. Not in anything we could measure or carry back with us. But something had taken hold. I knew it before I even unpacked the truck. I will be going back.